Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, the Food and Drug Administration grants a hospital request for a compassionate special permit to use the anti-parasitic drug Ivermectin against COVID-19. But one lawmaker and former health chief says the decision was more political rather than medical. The government temporarily stops the use of AstraZeneca vaccines due to reported blood clots linked to it, which was observed in other countries. And only a few days to go before the supposed end of the strictest lockdown in Metro Manila and nearby provinces, has this been enough to turn the tide of virus transmissions? Former health secretaries Janette Garin and Esperanza Cabral join us live. The Food and Drug Administration says it granted a hospital's request for a compassionate special permit to use the anti-parasitic drug Ivermectin against COVID-19. The FDA did not provide any further details, but it clarifies the distribution of the drug is still prohibited. A former health chief and now lawmaker says this was a political rather than a medical decision. Also, how is the government faring in its COVID-19 response? Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have former Health Secretary and Iloilo Representative Janette Garin. Congresswoman Garin, welcome to the source, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Pinky. Good morning.
Morning to you. So why did you describe as political rather than medical the FDA's recent decision to grant one hospital a compassionate permit for the use of ivermectin?
Basically, because it is not based on science. When we talk about the issuance of CSP, or compassionate special permit, it is given to a specialty institution or a specialty society. And almost always, if not all the time, that medicine is undergoing stage 3 clinical trial, either in its country of origin or other countries for that matter, or probably in the country where the CSP is issued. So it's I believe the decision of Dr. Eric Domingo to issue a CSP is basically based on the push of many politicians and powerful people in enticing the Filipino population to take ivermectin. Pinky, let me make it clear. I am not against ivermectin, especially when it comes to undergoing or doing clinical trials for its possible use in COVID-19. However, there have been similar studies in other countries, and there was no benefit generated. We have a lot of trials. There were trials on virgin coconut oil, on other supplements, but this is a drug which in its present concentration, because it's basically given to animals, would entail a higher concentration and would really be detrimental to the health of the general public. It can interact with other medications that a person is taking. It can cause overdosage. Patient can have seizure. Patient can be in coma. And it's giving our people, this is the worst thing, it's giving our people false hopes that it can cure COVID. I have been talking to many friends, and they have been seeing patients going to the emergency room. We do agree that our hospitals are currently congested, but it's a double blunder because people who came in late because they thought they were getting cured because they were taking ivermectin at home.
Is that so? So let's first start on this premise. While the WHO, even the US FDA, does not allow this for cure or even prophylaxis for COVID-19, siguro in a world full of articles and research and anecdotes, where do we go? And which do we believe? You may have friends who said that they used it and then eventually it did not work. Other people would say that they actually used it and it worked. There are studies pointing to the fact that ivermectin is a cure or even a prophylaxis for COVID-19. And then there's the other side saying there's not enough clinical trials really to prove this, because for one thing, you could have used ivermectin together with other drugs, other medicine, and you don't really know which one actually worked to help, cure, COVID-19?
Basically, the basis of all of this are personal testimonies, like people who would say, I took it and it cured me. We have to remember, and not all people are doctors. Most of the legitimate doctors who are not after the entrepreneurial side of it would know that viral infections has a certain cycle. They can maybe 80 or 90%, let's say for COVID, 80% are asymptomatic, 20% are mild to moderate or even severe COVID. So 80% would heal spontaneously. And even in COVID, even if you have a moderate COVID reaction, your body would interact with the virus. That's where your immunity plays a role on the first week. However, in the second week, if there are complications or effects on the patient, these are brought by the immune reaction. It's like the immunogenicity that it created is surpassing. Apologies, it's too technical. Pero ibig lang po kasi natin sabihin, sa first week, pag tinamaan ka ng COVID, nilalabanan ito ng katawan mo. After that first week period, yung pangalawang week na, ang nangyayari, yung mga nararamdaman ng tao ay dahil inaatake na ng sariling immune system ng tao ang katawan niya. That's why you give a toxi with a good anti-inflammatory effect. You give medications to control your immune reaction. So ang ibig nating sabihin, true to all viral infections, kusang mawawala yun, kusa kang gagaling, because that's the life cycle of a virus. And I believe this is the aspect that is being taken advantage of some people who are deceiving the public in telling them, take this, it's good for you, without being clear that there are a lot of consequences, where the risks outweigh the benefits, where there are complications that can be expected. In the US, where some of the people used ivermectin, the US FDA recorded a lot of reports of adverse effects. Now, the problem, another complicating problem in our country is the false hopes that ivermectin is giving.
Okay, but let me cut you there.
I'm starting to hear people saying, don't take vaccines. Ivermectin will protect you. It can have a vaccine-like efficacy where it will prevent 90% of COVID. So, this is very problematic.
I need to cut you there because you said a lot of things that I needed to get clarification. But you have doctors who swear by ivermectin. I know that this has to go through a rigorous process. There has to be clinical trials. It's not as if you can just, try a sample population tapos clinical trial na yon. It's a thorough process the clinical trials go through. But if you have doctors who swear by it, where does the public go in terms of trying to understand, pwede ba to sa akin o hindi?
That's basically the point, Pinky. There are two things that are paving the way for people to believe in ivermectin. 2 Ds, desperation and distrust on Secretary Duque and the FDA. And that is basically why some doctors can take advantage and promote a parasitic drug which is used basically on animals and as a topical preparation on skin disorders and even lice. Kung titingnan po kasi natin, it's usual for doctors to have discussions. Normal po yan. Sa lahat po ng scientific conferences, there will always be debates in a closed four corner of a conference room. And this is not done in one country. It's done worldwide. So you have many people discussing, and then at the end of the day, there will be a strong recommendation based on science. What's happening now is hindi eh. Somebody can come out with his or her own personal opinion, and that's it. But who will now be accountable if in case there are effects on the people? Look at the way that the CSP has been issued by FDA. Ang sabi is they don't even want to release the hospital. Why? In the administrative order that FDA has, when you issue a compassionate special permit, it is only to a specialty institution. Let's say if you're dealing with COVID, then issue it to the Lung Center of the Philippines or issue it to San Lazaro Hospital or a specialty society. Let's say you issue it to PISVID or to the Philippine, to the pulmonologists. it cannot be issued to unless that doctor is conducting a clinical trial. Moreover, Pinky, for a compassionate special permit, it is mandated that it has passed through stage 1 and stage 2, and you're now on stage 3. But all of these prerequisites have not been complied with if we're talking about ivermectin. So para bang, o sige,
Pero-
bibigyan na lang namin ng permit yan kasi natatakot ako, ang daming nagbabash sa akin. But
You think it's that?
is not,
You really think it's that?
that is,
Do you really think it's that there's basically you're saying the FDA is being pressured? Is that what you're saying?
yes, that's very clear.
They're being pressured by who? Social media and who else?
Well, I don't exactly know who is pushing FDA. That's why they have to be transparent. But any doctor who has had experience with regulation, especially regulation entailing drugs and medicines, would know that most of the prerequisites in the issuance of a compassionate special permit has not been complied with. But what is the consequence of this? Simply because FDA gave it the CSP, yung tao ngayon naniniwala na sasabihin nila, ayan o, binigyan ng FDA ng permit. Even if Eric Domingo says, okay, we're giving it the CSP, pero hindi pa rin siya pwedeng magamit sa COVID, it's already ground. Because what can be used as a marketing tool is people saying, this is already approved by FDA. The very institution that is supposed to safeguard the general public's health, that is actually an institution that should be left independent. Because when we talk about safety and efficacy of drugs, it entails review of many documents and many processes where they coordinate with other FDA agencies all over the world.
We can
And
like it
I
to
am not
even
aware, I'm definitely sure there is no other FDA in the whole world that granted ivermectin compassionate special permit for this pandemic.
that it's a point that you raised, no? Because there are doctors advocating this, politicians even people we know, people I know actually say they take it. And then now you have the FDA giving a compassionate special permit to one hospital. Two things there. Is it incumbent upon the FDA to identify this hospital? And my next question is, as you mentioned a while ago, with something like this will, what is the net effect of this? Parang kasi sinabi niyo na po kanina, Congresswoman, parang this will embolden people, encourage people to actually take it kasi pinayagan ng isang ospital eh.
Well, basically, that's the problem. First, you cannot say that it's for purposes of privacy that you cannot reveal the hospital. That's a no-no. There should be full transparency, especially if this is a clinical trial. Second, it should be a specialty institution, or it should be a specialty society, or the doctors who will be conducting it should be published. It should be very transparent because the patient's health, nakasalalay po kasi ang kalusugan ng bawat at ang proteksyon ng bawat sambayan ng Pilipino sa sinasabi ng FDA. FDA is the only authority in our country that deals with the safety and efficacy of medicines, drugs, and devices. Now, what is happening, pardon me for this, no, I'm really to say, but FDA is allowing itself to be bullied. And that's a very scary thing. Because the very institution that should be independent, the very institution that should take care and be transparent on the safety and efficacy of all the medicines that are coming to our country is now submitting itself to the outside pressures of the world. Discussions on science, yes, there will be opposite inputs, or let's say there will be nuances in terms of scientific discussions, but all of this should be confined in scientific communities. Hindi kasi pwedeng dalhin ang debate sa labas, and we rely on whoever has a stronger voice in social media, and we rely on whoever can approach politicians or powerful people, because that's not the way we deal with health regulation.
But who is bullying the FDA? If the FDA was bullied, who caused the bullying?
Well, you have investigations. Pardon me, I'm a member of Congress, but I don't really agree that it should be investigated in Congress. Why? Because you
Which
bring
you
the
did.
discussion of science outside. You bring the discussion of science away from the experts. And almost always experts would shy away from political investigations or congressional investigations for that matter. Siyempre, kapag ikaw naman ipapatawag, iimbestigahin ka, papagalitan ka, and you're just a scientist doing your job, you will just simply say, I don't want to be a part of this. And that is where we are wrong. No? People were saying this was used in Brazil. Yes, people were saying this was used in South Africa, but look at what happened to Brazil. They have a lot of deaths because people were complacent. People were hoping that they were taking ivermectin and it was either a preventive measure or something that was curing their COVID. And look at what happened. You have a Brazil variant. They use it in South Africa. They have a South Africa variant. That's why they stopped. Now we're using it in the Philippines. We have a Philippine variant, and it can be more. And ivermectin can interact with our body and all our other medications. It can lead to other mutations.
Opo, opo. So Congresswoman, obviously hindi po kayo sang-ayon dun sa nangyaring hearing at the House of Representatives regarding ivermectin. Here's a question. Would the FDA in any way or form possibly be liable for allowing this compassionate special permit or not?
Definitely yes, Pinky. I'm going to share with you, it actually started with Administrative Order number 4. I think that was in 1992 or 1993, issued by Secretary Flavier. It was amended last year, maybe somewhere around July. It was amended by Secretary Duque. This is the guidelines on the issuance of compassionate special permit. And it's very clear in the guidelines. The issuance of CSP for ivermectin is way beyond what is bounded in that. So hindi po pwedeng mamulitika ang FDA. You cannot just give outright permits without consulting the experts because the life of our people is at stake.
It seems like basically you're saying, Congresswoman, this sets a dangerous precedent because of the compassionate special permit. Here's a thought. Every time we talk about the emergency use authorization that is going to be allowed by the FDA for vaccines, galing na po sila sa China, yung Sinovac. May EUA na po siya sa ibang mga bansa. AstraZeneca, the same. May EUA na rin po sa ibang bansa. Pfizer, the same. Meron din po. But it takes, the FDA a minimum of 2 weeks. Let's just put it at, 2 weeks to 1 month before an EUA is actually granted. How long was it till the application for the hospital? Because if I remember correctly, Undersecretary Domingo said the application was really just this week, if I'm not mistaken, Tuesday.
That's precisely why nakakatakot. And you're right, Pinky. It's a very bad precedence. Let's say if I'm an entrepreneur and I would like to sell a medicine, not proven. We encountered that before with dengue. Parang nagkaroon, I think that was called berberine. It's a herbal concoction, and then it was introduced to the Department of Health and was used in 6 government hospitals. That was immediately stopped. We stopped it because it is unethical, it is baseless, and there is no science to it. Pero sa ngayon, what's happening now, apparently you're giving a precedence na kapag takutin mo, kapag ipaimbestiga mo sa Kongreso, ipaimbestiga mo sa Senado, or kung saan mo ipaimbestiga, give way na lang yung FDA. I mean, these scientific discussions should actually involve experts.
Okay, so as a last question, and excuse me for saying this, but that's basically you guys' fault. Because it was Congress, it was the House of Representatives that looked into and called the experts with regards to ivermectin.
Yeah, I do agree that it was a wrong move. That's why I was definitely against it. And even in the press conferences that we had in Congress, I spoke against it. You know, in a congressional hearing, it's the prerogative of the chairman to invite resource person. And it's pwede ka kasing may personal na pananaw, or you can have your own interest, or you can have your own direction, and just invite those who would you would like to speak. You would invite people who would like to pursue the direction that you want to take. But basically, we go back. We are in a pandemic. Initially, we were pitting one vaccine against each other. Ngayon naman, nag-aaway-aaway yung mga doktor. My God, we are in a pandemic. We need to be vaccinated. We need to immediately test and isolate the positive so that the virus will stop mutating. And we need to act with speed and unity, because the virus is united in attacking the world, but we as a people are fragmented, fighting against each other. We are seeing all the evils that has been the outcome, the output of all this greed and all these nuances and all these debates. At the end of the day, kawawa yung ating mga anak.
Former Health Secretary and Iloilo Congresswoman Janette Garin. Ma'am, maraming salamat po sa inyong oras, and take care. And more on the Ivermectin issue after the break. We're going to speak to former Health Chief Esperanza Cabral. We'll be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Let's now speak to former Health Secretary Esperanza Cabral. Secretary Cabral, your stand first and foremost on Ivermectin.
Oh, I'm sorry to agree with the Congresswoman Janette Garin. I think she's correct in saying that the issuance of a compassionate use permit must be done using the guidelines that the FDA and the DOH itself has promulgated. So we need to find out whether the issuance of the guideline actually did that or not, and if not, what happened.
But granting it to a hospital, one hospital for now, what are your thoughts on that? What could be the possible effects of granting a special permit to one hospital to use Ivermectin?
Well, it sets a precedence. After you have granted compassionate use to one hospital, you are now going to be under pressure to grant the same kind of compassionate use permit to another hospital. Given that there are guidelines, we must make sure that the guidelines have been followed so that the credibility of the regulatory agency is not affected. The FDA performs a very important role. They are the ones that guard us against unsafe and ineffective medicines. And if they are not able to do this with independence, using scientific basis, then their function is not properly done. And we must all make sure that we help the FDA perform their regulatory functions properly.
Congresswoman Garin was saying that the FDA was bullied or even pressured. Do you think that's true?
Oh, I would not discount that. I agree with her that when you are called to Congress, particularly if you are a government employee, you go there already intimidated from the very start. You know that there are positions that the congressmen or the senators have taken, and if you disagree with them, there are many consequences that can happen. The least of them is being embarrassed at that particular hearing.
Okay, I want to talk about the COVID response of government. I remember very clearly when people were asking, are we back to square one? Secretary Cabral was saying, no, we're not back to square one. We're actually 10 steps back. Where are we now?
I think we are at the same position. I stand by what I said, that we are worse off than we were at the start of the pandemic in early 2020. And you don't have to believe me. Just look at the figures and find out for yourself.
And there's a Facebook post that I read This needs to be clarified because basically you're saying that under the law, Republic Act 834, I think I missed a number here. This has to be 4 digits. Anyway, there is a law that tells hospitals and hospital administrations that they cannot turn away patients without, number one, stabilizing them, and even after that, they are mandated at some point or obligated to arrange them to move to another hospital. Please explain this to us because people are really moving from one hospital to another. And how can the hospitals cope? Because the emergency rooms are full, even the tents are full, and the ambulances are waiting outside.
That is true. We are in a very bad situation. I sympathize with the hospitals, but our primary duty is really to care for the patients to the best of our ability. And what is happening is that patients will see a sign at the door of the emergency room of the hospital that says, full capacity, we cannot take you, or something like that. So they will flit from one hospital to another. And in the time that they do this, their condition worsens, and some of them actually die while they are doing this. It is better for patients to just go to one place and wait to be treated there, because they will be treated there. The hospitals have no choice. If they have to be treated in their vehicles, the hospitals will have to do that. I am not saying that we should file cases against hospitals for not treating these patients. We understand what the situation is. I am telling patients that it is better to stay in one place than to go from hospital to hospital.
That's an advice coming from the health secretary, former health secretary, and a doctor as well, obviously. But when you're in a situation, Dr. Cabral,
Yes.
that your loved one cannot breathe anymore, and you're thinking that I might have to stay inside the car for at least 12 to 24 hours before somebody gives my loved one some medical attention, the instinct would really be to find another hospital, hindi mo ba?
Oo, tama ka, Pinky. Hindi talaga mapipigilan na pagka nakikita nila na nahihirapan yung kanilang mahal sa buhay, ay gusto nilang dalhin kung saan pwede siyang matingnan kagad. Pero ang problema nga doon is doon sa pagdadala mo na hindi ka naman sigurado doon sa pagdadalan mo, lalong napapasama yung kondisyon ng pasyente at merong namamatay sa ganong klaseng paggawa natin. So, para sa akin, mas mabuti pa na pupunta ka dun sa isang emergency room, sabihin mo, hindi ako aalis dito, kailangan na matignan kasi ang aking pasyente.
That's your advice
Yes.
to those who are frantically looking for hospitals to be able to have their loved ones treated, for possible COVID-19. All right. Secretary Cabral, Dr. Cabral, maraming salamat po sa inyong oras, and please take care. And thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.